It's taken 9 months to get here, but in the early hours of Friday, the UK and European Union agreed on some of the key issues surrounding Brexit. It is, however, just the first step. The agreement opens the way to start talks on what is, for the UK, the most important phase, establishing a trade deal with its biggest trading partner. But despite an upbeat tone from British Prime Minister Theresa May, the head of the EU Council, Donald Tusk, reminded everyone that the hard part is yet to come.
I very much welcome the prospect of moving ahead to the next phase, to talk about trade and security, and to discuss the positive and ambitious future relationship that is in all of our interests.
We all know that breaking up is hard, but breaking up and building a new relation is much harder. Since the Brexit referendum, a year and a half has passed. So much time has been devoted to the easier part of the task, and now to negotiate a transition arrangement and the framework for our future relationship, we have de facto less than a year.
So let us look at what the two sides have agreed on. One of the most contentious issues has been how much the UK will have to pay to settle its financial obligations to the EU. The final agreement doesn't contain any exact numbers, but the UK government now estimates the net cost of the divorce bill at between $47 billion and $52 billion. British and EU citizens will be able to continue to live and work in each other's territories, but it's not clear how the new rules will affect British people who want to move within Europe after Brexit. And it gives the European Court of Justice final say in difficult cases for 8 years after the divorce. And one of the thorniest issues was that of the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK. The text of the agreement says the UK will keep that border open to trade and people, but a failure to reach a trade deal between the UK and EU by March 2019 could yet result in tariffs being charged on goods moving between the two regions. So, despite Friday's agreement, the possibility of a hard border is worrying many people who rely on trade between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And among them, Irish farmers would be particularly vulnerable. Simon McGregor-Wood went to County Meath in the Irish Republic to meet some of them.
Ronan Delaney's farm is typical. Family-run and small-scale. His father and grandfather built it up. Lamb and beef reared for meat, mostly for the UK market. A hard Brexit would hurt.
The reality is there's 65 cattle in that shed. Over 50 of them will end up in the UK market in some shape or form. So for that initial period when Brexit, you know, if it does just stop dead in the tracks, where will they go? You know, we just won't be able to send them to all to China or the Philippines or Hong Kong overnight.
Ronan's cows end up here, processed into steaks and burgers, and for as long as both countries are in the EU's single market, all this can be in the UK within 24 hours. Nationally, Irish farmers export 550,000 tonnes of beef a year. 55% of that goes to the UK. That brings in $700 million a year to the Irish economy.
There are thousands of farms just like this one all across Ireland, and many have become similarly reliant on the UK as their biggest and closest market. A hard Brexit will be a massive shock to the system. Finding new markets will be a huge adjustment, and not every business will survive it.
Little wonder Irish politicians have been so insistent on protecting the open border with Northern Ireland. But any customs delays or tariffs with a post-Brexit UK as a whole would cause real damage.
I think you're looking at a very significant impact to the Irish economy. In some of the work that was done leading up to the vote, I think you're looking at something like a 4% impact to GDP over about a 10-year period.
On Ireland's farms, they're acutely aware the economic implications of Brexit will work both ways. The British government says it's leaving the single market and the customs union, but still wants a close and special relationship. Irish farmers desperately want that too.
There's 44 million jobs involved in the agri-sector across Europe, you know, and we can talk, we can give out, we can use whatever type of language, but I think for everyone involved, you know, the softer the Brexit and the closest that we can get to where we are at the moment, the better.
Ronan Delaney says if he wasn't an optimist, he'd have given up farming years ago. But he's anxious about the future. He says he'll probably survive a hard Brexit, but he wants the politicians to know it won't be easy. Simon McGregor-Wood, TRT World, County Meath, Ireland.
There's a lot at stake there, but let's go to Brussels where that deal was hammered out, and joining me from there is Kevin Ozebek. Kevin, great to have you. Give us an idea of some of the drama that unfolded in the early hours of Friday over there.
Well, really, this all started to unfold Thursday night. Right now in Brussels, it's a little after 6:30 p.m. It was about this time last night that the European Council sent out a release saying that Donald Tusk, the Council's president, was going to be giving an early Friday morning press briefing. That usually doesn't happen, so of course the press corps here went into a frenzy. Now, we knew the negotiations were very intense this week, and that's because Theresa May was here on Monday. We all know that we were expecting a breakthrough that ended up being botched because of the DUP really throwing a wrench into that. But it all came together late last night, early into this morning. The negotiations went around the clock over the past 24 hours. And around 7 o'clock this morning, Theresa May was here. The Union Jack was raised outside the European Commission behind me. Her and President Juncker had a breakfast, and the deal was done.
Let's throw this forwards now. This agreement has to go in front of the member states of the European Summit next week. Is that going to be a formality, or do you think that there's going to be some resistance from some of those states?
Right now, it doesn't look like there's going to be any resistance. And by the way, that summit is set for Thursday and Friday of next week. It's likely that the EU 27 will be looking at this when the summit starts on Thursday. The EU position all along has been, when it comes to this issue of the Irish border, our position is going to be whatever the Republic of Ireland's position is. Well, the Irish Prime Minister signed off on this breakthrough, and that's actually why this breakthrough happened, because he gave the okay. So because Ireland is going along with this, it looks like the other EU 26 will be going along with this as well.
Kevin Ozebek in Brussels, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, Geraint Johnes is a professor of economics at Lancaster University, and he joins me from there. Professor Johnes, welcome back to Money Talks. Great to have you, as always.
Hello.
Let me start by asking you, what are the risks that what's been agreed on today could get unravelled as we go forwards?
Well, today has really been the day where hard Brexit has met hard reality with a hard bump. And there's still a lot of work to be done, but what does appear to be the case now is that the options have narrowed somewhat. We're less likely to get a hard Brexit. We're more likely to get something that looks like a Canada or a Canada Plus deal, or a Norway-type solution with the UK becoming part of the European Economic Area. And that's a sense of relief around that, because a hard Brexit would have been very damaging both for the UK's economy and also perhaps even more so for Ireland's economy. The latest estimates that we have suggest that Ireland's GDP would have fallen by around 5% as a result of a hard Brexit. So from their perspective, the softer Brexit can be, the better.
Despite your optimism there, the markets don't seem to be all that optimistic. I'm just looking at the pound. It's actually down about 0.7% against the dollar. Do you think that the markets are anticipating more? I mean, the hard Brexit that you talk about is still very much on the table, though.
In economic terms, there isn't a lot of good news to come out of Brexit. There are reasons why the British electorate voted for Brexit, but they're not generally economic reasons. There will be an economic cost, and people generally accept that. So the markets may reflect the fact that the options now have narrowed somewhat, but in reality, we face a lot of tough negotiation going into the second phase. So many of the negotiators have been saying that the first step has been the easy step. There's a lot of very detailed work to be done now to thrash out exactly what kind of relationship Britain is going to have with the European Union going forward, and there'll be tough negotiations involved in that.
Let's talk about Prime Minister Theresa May for a second. Now, many see this deal as a victory for Theresa May, and it does seem to have the buy-in of some of those hardliners. I'm thinking of Michael Gove, Arlene Foster of the DUP, within her coalition. But there are still other hardliners who say the government has just given away too much. Could they yet scupper a trade deal, do you think?
One of the key things we've got in this document that's been released today, in paragraph 49, there's this reference to a default position of full alignment. And if some of the more fanciful suggestions of the hardline Brexiters about monitoring cross-border traffic, if they don't come to pass, then the default position would be full alignment. And that would be in line with what was agreed in the Good Friday Agreement, where we had a Council of Ministers being set up in order to promote things that were beneficial mutually to Ireland and the UK. So there's a lot of work still to be done. We need to see how things will pan out. Theresa May so far has managed to tread a very thin line and keep people happy on both sides of her, but she has got a very tough task ahead.
There is still the possibility, though, that some of the issues from phase one could be kicked down the road to phase two. I'm particularly thinking of the settlement bill. I mean, the government has given this indicative range of how much it could be paying, but there are chances that it could be a lot more than that still. What would happen to the negotiations if the final bill ends up being more than what the government is advertising right now?
Well, the financial settlement is made up of several components. So there are things in there that are quite clearly amounts that the UK owes on things like pensions for European Union civil servants that have been working for the UK as part of the European Union over the last 40 years or so. So there are things there that are quite uncontroversial. There are other things there that are to do with agreed policies going forward that the UK has signed up to, and other policies that are yet to be determined in the reste liquide component there. So there's some wiggle room, but certainly what has been done in this agreement is to set out what things will be covered rather than the specific figures that will be attached to them.
Right. Professor Geraint Johnes, I'm afraid we are out of time, but thank you ever so much.